gets quoted in the market. But remember, don't use words like introduced, because last week we studied it's a method of being listed. It's a particular type of being listed. So if you're generally speaking, use the word listed or quoted when you're writing for your answers. So there we understood why companies opt for listing. We know compared to debentures, shares are a relatively costlier instrument to raise funds. But still, people actually, or companies opt for such source of financing because it is less pressure on their cash flow. It's not mandated for them to declare dividends or to pay back the capital. Okay, and it allows the company to take on risk and expand at a much higher rate. So equity is a choice for most companies. So if you're using equity and you're going to get listed, what kind of benefits that you will have? Just as you have benefits of getting listed in the stock exchange, remember, you also have the downsides. And now these downsides are mainly for the company. Even we discussed about the advantages, remember I mentioned the last three that we listed here are more or less the benefit that the investor gets. If a company has the shares listed in the stock exchange, has an investor, I will have more disclosure on the business activities of the company. I will have more control or transparency of the company's management and their decisions. And the other is, as an investor or a predator investor, I can purchase companies and gain controlling stake. So the last three are more on the outlook of an investor. The first two are more towards what the company will get by getting listed. Now, if you want to expand the advantage, you can also list down the advantages of actually using equity as a source of financing as well. Okay. So what were the disadvantages? Now, these, why I'm going through in detail, is these are areas that you all can score very easily. But when it comes to the paper, your exam environment, students tend to think so much to come up with a point and they waste time. So understand what it means and the finer points, so it's easier for you to elaborate or build on the point. Okay, so in terms of the disadvantages, it's costly for the company. Remember, if you're going to get listed, you need to have a lot of PR, public relations in the market. So a lot of advertising, awareness to the market about what the company is, what the company is doing, who are the shareholders. So transparency is very high. So that transparency itself results in a high cost for the company. The other one is there's a lot of documentation. Now, the recent example that you can know, you could know is, now remember we had the COVID issue. So many companies are struggling to finish off their audited financials for the March ended 31st March ended financial accounts. So for those listed companies, they have given a leeway, some kind of a gap, but still there is a particular deadline when it comes to when they need to submit their financials. So as a listed company, you have to adhere to it. If not, you get watch listed. It is not a good it's not a good thing for you, for your reputation, when you're a watch listed share. Okay, so to keep your reputation, to maintain your reputation, you have to meet these criteria, which can be costly and a lot of documentation involved. And the other one is, because you have so much of transparency, you have to declare to your shareholders what your next step is. Remember, they are your owners. So if you are not going to tell them what you're going to do next, they would not want to hold the share, because they don't know the true value of the company, remember. But if you actually inform them your future plans, what you're going to do ahead, that the particular shareholder can be anyone, even your competitor coming and buying your company share, it's possible. So you might be disclosing your information to a predator investor or to a competitor. So that information itself can be detrimental. By giving out that information, you might lose out opportunities or you might get competitor threats. So those are the main disadvantages of being a listed company in the stock exchange. Okay. So then the main focus that we had last week was the ways of being listed. Now remember, we had three main ways: introduction, private placement, and public offering. Okay, those were the main three: introduction, over here, if you introduction, private placement, and both of these together is called public offering. Now that public offering can be done as an offer for sale or as an offer for subscription. It's just two types of public offering. Now distinctly know the three differences when it comes to introduction, private placement, and public offering, and also understand the difference between offer for sale and offer for subscription, because those are areas where you can easily get confused and areas that the examiner would want to test. So those are the areas that you can miss easily and lose out on points. So that can be a preferable area to test in. Remember, introduction, no cash flow to investor, no cash flow to the company, no inflow to the company, no inflow to the investor. It is just a method of listing. It is not a method of share issue. Know that. Okay, you're not issuing anything newly, so therefore the company is not getting any money. The existing investors are not selling down, so the investors are not getting any money. You're basically just listing your existing shares in the stock market. So the benefit that the company or the investor gets is you get the prestige of being a listed company, and for the investor, more liquidity. They can easily trade their shares in the stock exchange. Private placement is a share issue and a method of listing, but remember, it's not a public offering. You do not go to the public and issue it. You have a selected pool of small investors. Usually those are the institutional investors. It can be EPF, ETF, certain provident pension funds, certain insurance companies who would want to buy in bulk. Okay, so for them, the company will privately approach them. It's like a promotion. They will explain what the company does and market their share so that the private investors are willing to invest in it, and they would effect the trading. Okay, but remember, even though private placement, usually there is a prospectus being issued here, unlike for introduction. Why? Because along with private placement, usually a component of public offering also goes in line with it, and prospectus becomes easier to market your company because you will have the forecast, you will have your future outlook and the current status all in one book or one publication. Okay, offer for sale, offer for subscription. Remember the difference. We saw even practically looking at two prospectus how to figure out if it's an offer for sale and offer for subscription. Offer for sale, company does not get the money. Existing shareholder is selling down his share, but the sale happens to the public. You do not sell down to a private chosen set of investors, but the selling down happens to the public that anyone in the market can subscribe for. But here, company does not get any inflow. It's the exiting shareholder who will get the money. Still, again here, you will have a prospectus being issued. Why? It's a public offering. Therefore, you need to have a prospectus to explain or communicate about the company. Offer for subscription is the most common issue that you can see. New shares being issued. In offer for sale, already the security is issued. Subscription, it's new shares being issued. So the company will get new inflow, equity inflow to the company. Again, know the advantages of an initial public offering. That's the very first time the company is going in for a public offering. So what are the advantages of going into it and the disadvantage? Disadvantage is a mix of disadvantages of being listed, disadvantages of using equity as a source of financing. So both of them together you can list out for your disadvantages of going into an initial public offering. You can also cite another disadvantage, which is there is a threat of not being fully subscribed. Now, in a private placement, because you privately go and speak to the investors and promote, you definitely know whether they are willing to buy or not. But when it comes to public offering, and moment you issue that, make the public statement of the IPO, and until you get the applications from the shareholders, from the prospective shareholders, you do not know whether you are oversubscribed, subscribed, or undersubscribed. Now I have used three terms. Subscribed is you issue 1 million shares, you get applications for exactly 1 million shares. That means you're fully subscribed. Oversubscribed, you have 1 million shares to be issued, but you have received applications for 2 million shares. That is, you can use it as a PR strategy. If you can recall, I think Odell was oversubscribed 63 times more than what they had issued. So those reflects the confidence that the public has on the company and the willingness to invest in the company. So oversubscribed is always better for a company, less riskier, no underwriter cost being involved and whatnot. But if it's undersubscribed, you have 1 million shares, but you get applications for only 500,000 or anything less than the 1 million, it becomes a bad outlook on the company. Why? That investors are not willing to, that the investors are not attractive or not willing to invest in the company. Now, this will happen, practically speaking. It can be due to the company's fault itself. Maybe the company is not an investment-worthy company, or maybe the appetite in the market is not set enough to invest in new shares. So that's why you usually go with a manager to the issue. Remember, when we studied in the primary market, you have origination, underwriter, and distribution, the three functions. Remember, in that under origination, we understood as a sponsoring or a manager in issue, you will advise the issuing company on several criteria. And one such advice is whether it is the correct time to get into the market and issue your shares. Because if you issue your shares at the wrong time, you have the risk of being undersubscribed. And if such undersubscription happens, it becomes a bad mark on the company. Okay, so to avoid that, due to a market situation, you have managers who advise you this is the good time to getting in, maybe wait 3 months more. So they would give such kind of advice. If it's a company related issue, again, you have managers to the issue who will advise the company and saying, look, you have these issues. With these issues, unlikely for it to be fully subscribed. So either the company can rectify the scenario, rectify their lapses, or get an underwriter on board. Okay, so when you're coming to the disadvantages of IPO, we have already mentioned of the underwriter cost. But you can also compare it with the private placement and write that there is an uncertainty of not being fully subscribed. That uncertainty is there when it comes to IPOs, when you compare it with the private placement. Then you have the types of stock issue. This is more or less, if you had done commerce or business studies, you should be knowing it. The bonus issue and the rights issue are common types of share issue for the existing shareholders. That's the key point. The main difference is in rights issue, you pay a price. Bonus issue, the investor doesn't pay anything. But rights issue, as an investor, you pay less than the market going price. Okay, that's the main reason that a rights issue being done. But practically, if you're aware about what happens in the stock market, there are situations, abnormal situations, you would say, where certain companies have gone into rights issue when their price was higher. I recall there's this particular company, their market price was 28 at the time, and they went in for a rights issue at 22 rupees. And usually when they go for the rights issue, there is a window for you to apply for it. And before the deadline hit, the existing price of the company had come down so much, it was below the rights issue price. It came down to a level of 21 to 20. So at that time, the subscription for the rights issue was affected. So it's not actually a benefit for the existing investors because they could already buy it at 21. Okay, so that kind of a mishap happens, but understand the concept of rights issue. Share split, existing number of shares is being split. Already you have maybe 10 shares in issues, 10 share in issue. You will split one share into two, which makes your existing number of shares 20. Okay. Stock repurchase. Remember, even in the other two videos I shared, you would have seen this jargon being used. Share repurchase is usually done when a company is well developed and well established. They have good cash reserves and they want to concentrate or reduce their share ownership. Then what they would do is they would pay the investor. The company would pay the investor and buy back the share. Okay, I think recently John Keels had a stock repurchase, if I'm correct. You can have a look on it. So when such a thing happens to a company which is already less dependent on debt sources, it is all right. It's an indication of that company being strong enough. But if it's a company who is already levered and going into stock repurchase, usually it's not recommended. Why? It will make their gearing very high and dependency to debt sources very, very high. So it's very unlikely that such a high geared company going into a stock repurchase. Then you have mandatory offer. Again, this you can see very frequently in the market. There were two companies who had this recently. If I'm correct, when Janashakti PLC brought over Dunamis PLC, they had a mandatory offer done in, I think, last year, December. Then there was, I think, Sterling bought over People's Merchant, a huge stake. Again, then, whenever the bulk when you increase your existing ownership or your existing percentage of share ownership more than 30%, the mandatory offer clause gets triggered, which means you have to offer, as the buying investor, you have to offer the other investors the chance to purchase at the same price, to sell down at the same price, to sell down at the same price. So if I am the investor who have increased the share ownership, earlier if I had 10% and increased my share ownership to now 40%, the mandatory offer gets triggered. Okay, so and that time what happens? If I had increased my stake, that got my additional, reached at 40% by buying the shares at 10 rupees, then I, the one who has that more than 30% ownership, will have to offer the other investors to sell at 10 rupees. Remember, the company has nothing to say in it. It is between the shareholders that it happens. I hope that is clear to you. We also had a diagram last week and explained it. Remember the threshold above which the mandatory offer gets invoked. I think if you go to the particular company website, if you use the, let's see, I think Dunamis is now, it's delisted, sorry. Let's see, People's Merchant. I think they had a mandatory offer. They had private placement. It was somewhere around last week that they, I mean last year that they had. Let's see. See, so this is the, if you can have a look at the press release, you can see this. So this company has increased their stakeholding to 67.9%. Accordingly, the mandatory offer is being triggered. You can see as per the rule. So at the same price that they bought at 9.5. So at the same price, the company which increased will make the mandatory offer to the remaining shareholder. Okay, when we at your spare time, the companies I mentioned, have a visit, go to the stock exchange website, go to that particular company and read up on the announcements that they make, so you understand the jargons used and how the market actually operates. It helps you to have a updated knowledge. So then, I think just before we closed up for last week, we looked at the bull market and the bear market. When I was a student, this was one of the main confusing terms, the bull and the bear. But one of the things that helped me remember the two types is always remember the bull charges ahead. Okay, you can see the two diagrams itself. Bull always charges ahead. So the term bull market is used when the current participants in the market expect the market to do well, expect the market to pick up, stock prices to increase continuously. They have a positive outlook on the economy, positive outlook on inflation and the GDP levels. So such a market or such a market is called a bull market. Such an outlook is called the bullish outlook. A bullish outlook means you expect the market to pick up and stock prices to increase in the future. Okay, because it's a rising trend, they use the word bull to indicate the charging forward metaphor. Okay, bear market on the other hand is, you can see bear as an animal, always they pull down or they bend down when it comes to any threat. So that's why bear market, meaning that in that kind of outlook or in that kind of a market, you expect the economy to do bad, you have a negative outlook on the GDP and the inflation levels, and therefore you expect market prices to come down. Okay, remember, stock market is your expectations on what the share would do. Okay, that's how the market works. If you feel a company is going to do well in the future, you will buy that particular company's share, or you will invest more in the stock market. If you feel the country is going to do well, the manufacturing sector is picking up, the economy as a whole is going to grow. If you have such outlook, your stock exposure is going to increase. But if you have a company in mind, and if you feel that company is not going to do well, you will sell down on that company share. Or if you feel that the country is not doing well, market is not doing well, then you will cut down exposure in your stock portfolio. You will reduce your stock investments. So that will trigger eventually the bear market to continue. Imagine if one investor is selling down, another would again follow the rule, another would follow the same pattern. So when there are so many investors selling down, it will trigger a panic in the market, which will eventually make the bear market to continue. So that's why they say a bear market depends on the outlook or the perception on the economy, the country as a whole. But remember, in the bull market, if you're an investor, it's easy to earn profits. Then you can remember, it's always increasing. If you buy today, tomorrow the price has definitely increased in a bull market. So just by buying today and selling tomorrow, you earn a profit. Okay, but in a bear market, trading becomes very, very tricky. Why? The price is continuously declining. Now, if you take this same, let's have a look at it. Let's see if we use the market as a graph, and you have the market always moving upwards. Okay, it's charging ahead. It's a bull market. Okay, so in such a market, always the price will keep increasing. So you can easily trade and increase your wealth, earn gains, earn capital gains mainly in such a market. Okay, remember, in a bull market, the source of income or the source of cash flow is more towards capital gain. Then in a bear market, what happens? Bear market, you will have a declining trend. Okay, it's a declining trend. So if you purchased at 20 rupees today at 12 o'clock, you bought at 20 rupees. And tomorrow at 12 o'clock, it would have definitely come down to 15. And then the day after, it will come down to 10. So it's a continuous declining. At that particular time, how can an investor earn a return? Remember, investors are very, very creative. The traders are very, very creative, or brokers are very, very creative. Even in a bear market, still you can earn profits as an investor. Okay, just because prices are declining, it doesn't mean that you cannot earn a return. You can, but it's tricky. You have to be a very informed or very strategic investor. Both markets, you can earn a return. Bull, it's very easier. Bear market, you have to be very cautious on your timing. The one obvious way that you can use to earn in a bear market is, let's use another platform. Keep this here. A easier method is, okay, so remember, in a bull market, your prices are continuously declining. It will definitely pick up. Okay, so one particular timing that you can use is, if you know the price, if you know the timing, so if you know the timing actually of when the market would pick up, or if you get the indications of an economy being turned upwards, then At the right price if you buy, and when the bear market turns to a bull market, you can easily get your profit. Okay, so that becomes timing. Now this is very tricky. You need to understand how the market works, the future outlook on what would actually help this U-turn in the market. You need to be informed, okay, to make this call. But there is another technique that you can use, trading in the bear market, and get a higher capital gain or higher return in the market, and that is called short selling. If you see the last week video, they would have explained it as well. Short selling is an investment or trading strategy that speculates on the decline in the stock price. Now here I have used the word investment because there are certain people who would want to invest in such share and hold it for some time, but usually most of the time it is a trading strategy. Now let's see the difference between trading and investment when it comes to the last bit of the slide. I'll explain it to you when we go to the valuation technique. But for now, remember, investment is when you invest in a share and expect to hold the share for a very long time. Trading strategy or trading is when you want to invest the share today, earn your quick return, and get out of the share very quickly. Okay, you don't want to hold that investment for a very long time. It's your if your motive is to earn quick money, it's trading. Okay, but if you want to hold the share, earn a very in a longer term, but get a higher return, a capital gain by holding the share for a longer time, it's investment. All right, so short selling, they say it can be done for both perspective, but practically it's mostly used towards trading strategy. Now what they do is they trade based on speculation. Okay, now here what happens is they would borrow a stock. The investor would borrow the stock at the very first time from another shareholder. Okay, and then next they would sell the borrowed stock immediately. Okay, immediately, after they borrow, they will sell that particular share. After some time, they would buy the same share and return to the original owner. Now you will be wondering, wow, how can that actually earn a return to you? As usual, let us go to our paint actually to have a better look on it. Now here you are in a bear market. Okay, we know that bear market, there's a continuous decline in the market. As an investor, now you have, first step is you have borrowed the stock. Now I will explain why this has to be borrowed, but for now, understand your first part of the technique is you will borrow the share. After you borrow, you immediately sell down. Immediately sell. Why? Now remember, always the market price is declining. So you will immediately sell at, let's assume here it's 20 rupees. You will immediately sell down at 20 rupees. Okay. And now remember, you borrowed the stock. So you will have to return the stock. I mean, you have to return the borrowed stock after a particular time, right? So let's assume it's 1 month. Okay. So beginning of August, you borrowed the stock. Now we are coming closer to the end of August and you want to return the stock. So you know the prices are declining. It's a bear market. So you will, if you have to return on the 31st and you know the bear market is still continuing, You will wait till maybe the 30th or even the 31st to sell, to buy the share. But by the moment you, at the moment when you buy it, now remember here you're going to sell. So you get, the trading investor gets 20 rupees. Okay. And now here you're going to buy the share. Now let's see, at the moment you're buying it, it's at 8 rupees. Because in a bear market, the stock fall is very drastic and continuous. So 8 rupees. So there itself, you have a 12 rupee gain. Okay. Where you've made 12 rupees by not even investing in the share. Remember, when you borrow, you have to pay a fee to the original investor. So that fee is minimal. It can be 5 rupees per, let's assume 5 rupees per month. So if you make 12 rupees, you minus the fee, still you earn 7 rupees by actually doing nothing. Okay, by actually doing nothing, you get 7 rupees. That is your return. Now remember, you sell and you have the 20 rupees. Using the same 20, closer to the end, you will buy the share. So you will only use 8 rupees out of the 12. Out of the 20. Okay. So you have 12 rupees left. Again, so you have your share and you have 12 rupees now. So the day you have to return the share, you will return the share to the original investor, and you will say, okay, I need to pay you a fee, what, 5 rupees. So out of the 12, you will pay 5 to him. You still have 7 rupees. So that's an easier way to earn quick money. Okay. Now, why we are saying at the very first instance, it has to be borrowed, because if you purchased the share, you are going to face a much higher loss. Okay. Imagine you purchased at this point. So let's assume it's 22 rupees, and then you sell at 20, and then again you buy. You are facing the loss. But by borrowing, you're just changing hands and you earn a much larger return. So short selling, understand that there are 3 main steps. You borrow the share from the original investor for a fee. You immediately sell. Why are you immediately selling it down? Remember, prices are continuously falling. So you have to immediately sell, because tomorrow's price is going to be lower. So you immediately get rid of the stock. You earn a higher price than tomorrow's price. Okay. So then you wait to the period closer to the time that you have to return the share, or when the share price has come very low, you will purchase the share. You will purchase the share at a much lower price and return to the original investor. And from all this, you will get a much higher return. Understand how the process works. Here they have, in the fourth part of it, they've justified on how they've earned the profit. So mainly it has 3 steps. Okay. Through this, earns a return as the price at which the investor sold is higher than the price at which investor bought. Sorry, here there's a typing error. Bought. Given the bear market where prices are continuously declining. Remember, short selling during bear market. Next, we have the stock symbol. Now here, remember we studied something called ISIN when it comes to the debt instruments. When it comes to stock, again, you have something called the ticker. That's the word that they use. It's called ticker. Ticker refers to the stock symbol. Now here, I hope you can have a look at it. So this is the trading screen for the shareholder when they're trading, and even for the brokers. This is how the screen looks like. The trading screen looks like. So you have the companies, you have the bid prices, the prices and the quantity, then the ask price and the ask quantity, how much gets traded, the trading price that's happening at the moment, and the quantity, and at the timing. Okay. So bid is the price that they are willing to buy. Ask is the price that they are willing to sell. So all of these are there for in one screen, so the investor can make a quicker decision. And they know the prices that is being traded at the moment. Now here you can see each company has an abbreviated form. Okay, and again, in our earlier lessons, we understood whenever the term N is used, it is the voting share. When you use the word, the letter X, it's the non-voting share that you have. Now, when you go to the stock exchange, see here, they display the price list in terms of the ticker and the company. If you want to know, you go to the main screen, scroll down, you can get the latest share price. So what they do is you have when the market opened, you have the opening price. During the day, the highest price it went, the lowest price it went, and the last traded price is given. So that's more or less like the closing price. Okay. So for each company, you have a symbol, and it is this symbol that is called the ticker. Now, there is a reason why the ticker was developed. If you see the last week video, they would have explained it to you. Why? Because in the old times, for newspapers to communicate the latest stock prices, it was difficult for them to keep writing the long company names. It took so much of paper and it took so much of printing time. And because of that, they developed a smaller abbreviation. So it's easier to communicate about the share. And the shorter version was the stock symbol, which is famously known as the ticker. Now here you have alpha numeric count to represent the particular share. If you know the ticker, you can easily search for the ticker, and the ticker is specific to that particular company. Now, sometimes you can see after the company is listed. Now, when the company is listed itself, you will get your ticker assigned. Now, here you can see Alumex, you have alum.n. But there are some instances where the company name would not tally with the ticker given now when it comes to this particular company or in this particular company. Okay, and even in this. So what happens is that company would have been listed at a much different name. That's why the ticker was in that particular name. But after listing, they must have changed the name. But still, the ticker doesn't get changed. Ticker is fixed. The time you get listed, you get a ticker assigned. That is the stock symbol for that particular stock, irrespective of whether the company changes the name after that. Okay. Again, this ticker is what they use to communicate in newspapers, in financial magazines. When they talk about the company's shares, for it to be abbreviated, they use these symbols. So if you can go to the Financial Times, the share market, the summary of the previous day, they would be using the ticker to better represent the share. So next we move on to types of trade orders. Now we understood how the company gets listed, how a startup company converts into a private limited when they grow, and then they move into a listed company. Now remember, there are instances where a startup can expand at a higher pace and directly move into a listed company itself, but I'm taking the longer route to explain you better. Now, this was the company angle. So once you get a listed company, you have methods of listing and advantages of being listed as well. And in a bull market and a bear market, accordingly, the prices would move. And the trading techniques. Now we move on to the perspective of the investor. If you and I are the investors in the stock exchange trading, how would we trade in the market? As an investor, we cannot directly involve in the stock exchange. Each investor has a stock broker. There are brokering companies. I think at the moment you have 28 brokering companies. So each investor, now in Sri Lanka, each investor has to approach a broker, and the broker will create your CDS accounts. Again, all these specific and the techniques we are going to look next week when we talk about the Colombo Stock Exchange in specific. We are going to learn how Colombo Stock Exchange works, what the CDS is, the main boards, indexes and everything. But I'm explaining you the usual trading process. So the investor through the broker, okay, my writing is a bit, through the broker will reach the stock exchange. Okay. The ultimate decision is by the investor, but the communicating arm or the bridging arm is the broker. He will communicate. Now, if the investor wants to sell that particular order, okay, that particular order is executed through the broker. Investor will call the broker and say, I want to sell 1,000 shares, make the order. So the broker is the one who will enter the order in the system. So then what happens? Once they enter, it will appear on screen to all other investors. Similarly, when you have to buy, if I am the investor, I will call up a broker and I will say buy so much, this amount of amount of quantity at this particular price, and they would execute the order. Now, there is no hard and fast rule saying you have to work with one broker. Usually you go with one because you have a much better relationship with that broker. That broker knows your stock portfolio in and out, and because of the relationship, the communication of market details or market happenings, the hot picks in the market might be quicker. So usually they go with one broker, but you have funds, okay? You have equity funds. Companies who raise funds from small investors and then invest in stock markets. Such companies would have about 5 to 6 stockbrokers, and they would allocate each of their trading to one broker. Okay, they would deal through them. You will have mainly institutional investors use more than one broker to trade in the market, but understand how the communication actually works. The ultimate decision is by the investor. Broker is the bridging or the main communicating vehicle in the market. Will communicate the investors' concerns to the stock exchange or the investor orders to the stock exchange. Similarly, the information received in the stock exchange is communicated to the investor through the broker. The current happenings or the day-to-day trading information gets communicated through the broker to the investors. So now when the investor makes the order, it can be a buying or the selling order, we need to know what kinds of orders are available for the investor to make. There are several types, and the broker is aware of the each type. Each type of order says the broker needs to act in this particular manner. So that's why you have several types of orders. And now we are going to look into what kind of orders that they have and what that order actually means. Okay, the very first or the most common order used by investors is the market order. Now let's see what the slide has to say. Market order is an order to buy or sell specified number of securities. Again, it can be, you can use the word shares. I've used the broader term securities immediately at the current price. Now here, the key word that you need to use is immediately. Remember, you have several types of orders. We are going to highlight and see the key features of each order. Why each one is different from each other. The key indication or the key word when it comes to market order is immediately. You execute the order immediately at the current price. Here, the order is executed immediately at the best possible price. If the order cannot be completely filled in one trade, it is filled by other trades at the next possible price. The emphasis in a market order is the speed of execution. Highlight that. Now here what happens is, let me have a small water break. So in a market order, what happens is, let's say, I'm bad at this. Okay. Now we know stock market can be very fluctuating. It can move high, move low, again high. It's very, very fluctuating. So given such kind of a fluctuation, if I make now this, let's assume this is the time, okay, time, and this is the price, okay, price. So this is the the usual market opening time. Let's assume 9:30 a.m. So when the market open, I immediately make a market order to buy the share, okay, to buy the share immediately at, I'm not going to specify the price, but let's assume the current price in the market is 80 rupees. Okay. As an investor, when I see the market happening, the very first, when the market opens, my share is at 80. So I call up my broker and I say, you immediately buy 100 shares of X company. Okay. 100 shares of X company. That's my order. And when it's a market order, it will get immediately executed. So the moment I make the order, the order has to get immediately placed and you immediately buy the available shares of that particular company. Okay. But here, when it comes to market order, the execution is guaranteed. Why? The moment I call up and tell my broker, he will immediately purchase the shares of that particular company. But what is the price? We know price in the market keeps moving. Now, if you take this particular example, it was at 80. Let's assume within, if this is 10 o'clock, just within this particular time span. Okay, this particular time span, the price would have moved here. Let's say at 9:45, it's at 83. So my broker will execute my order, but the price at which he is buying, I can't control, but because he's immediately purchasing it. So whatever the price that is available, he will purchase at that particular price. So even though I looked at 80 and made the order, until the order is fulfilled, I don't know the price at which he bought. Okay, understand that. I look at the market, I know the share is currently trading at 80, but when I inform my investor, I say immediately buy 100 shares of that particular company. I don't specify a price to him. Okay, I say immediately buy this quantity. When he immediately purchases it, whatever in the current market price, he will buy. So if the current market price is fluctuating and has moved up, at that particular price, he would completely fill up my order. Okay. Now, sometimes favorably, it can come down, maybe at this point. Then the investor would be at a benefit. But until my order is filled or my order is completed, meaning they have all purchased the shares, I don't know the price at which the broker bought. Okay, that's a disadvantage in market order. Now this is the buying side of it. Okay, let's assume a market order to sell a particular company's share. Again, 100 shares of a company, I already have it. I only have 100 shares of X company and I want to immediately sell down. So let's assume at this point, where the market price, let's say 100 rupees, market is currently trading at 100. So I will call up my broker and say immediately sell my entire stock of shares on X company. I have 100 shares. I will say immediately sell at X company. So what happens is, by the time the broker goes, enters my order and sells the shares, the price would have drastically come down. Okay. So until the broker actually sells my shares and informs me, I don't know the price at which he sold. Okay. So here the certainty of the order being done is there, but the price I do not know until it is executed. All right. That's the main feature when it comes to market orders. The advantage of a market order is that order is guaranteed to be filled, which indicates execution certainty. But the disadvantage in the market order is price it will be executed at is not known ahead of time. So it has price uncertainty. Until the order is executed and it's completed, I don't know the price. So I have, as an investor, if I make a market order, I have to bear the fluctuation in the price. Okay. Now here in the slide, I would have made this statement. The third statement. I will come back to it when we discuss another type of order. But for now, just put an asterisk to it. Why I've mentioned it. I've mentioned this order is not completely filled in just one trade. Now here, if I want to trade 100 shares, if I want to buy 100 shares, that 100 shares can be done in one trade or it can be done in 5 trades. Again, let me be clear. If I want to buy 100 shares and I have another seller who is selling 100 shares, immediately in just one transaction, I can buy my 100 shares. So in one trade, I execute my order is completed. But if I want to buy 100 shares and I have one investor selling 20 shares, another investor selling 30 shares, another investor selling again 20, another 30, then I have to do 4 transactions, therefore 4 trades to complete my order. Understand? So when you have a market order, it's not necessary for you to complete your order in one trade. Just because it's immediate doesn't mean you have to do only one trade and complete it. You can have several trades, but it happens immediately. Okay? You have another type. That why I have mentioned it here is because you have another type where you only have to trade in that bulk amount. You can't have more than one trades. So that's why I've used it, mentioned it here to differentiate. The other one is limit order. Now, obviously, market order it has its disadvantages. So you have another type of order which is opposite to the market order. Very opposite, but again, it addresses to the disadvantage of the market order, but it loses the execution certainty. Okay, let's see that. Limit order. This is also called as pending order. If they use another term called pending order, remember it's another word they use for limit order. Limit order is an order to trade at the limit price or better. And this is the key word. A maximum or minimum price is set depending on whether it is a buy or sell order. For sell orders, the execution price must be higher or equal to the limit price. Hence, a minimum price is set. For buy orders, the execution price has to be lower or equal to the limit price. Therefore, it's a maximum price. Order could be valid for a specified time, after which it will expire, or valid until it is cancelled. However, if market prices do not react as required by the limit, the trade will not be completed. Hence, execution uncertainty. Now here in the market order, we had execution certainty. Remember, you have execution certainty, but you don't have price certainty. It was uncertain at what price that you will actually do the trade. Now you have limit order, which is very opposite. You have the price certainty here, but you don't have the execution certainty. Okay. Now let's see how limit orders works. Again, let's assume, I hope I can draw similar to what I drew earlier. Okay. Let's assume the same market pattern, but now I call up my broker, my stock broker, and then now earlier what did I say? I say if I want to buy or sell, I will say sell 100 shares of X company, buy 100 shares of X company immediately. It becomes market order. But here what I say is, I say buy 100 shares of X company at a maximum price of 80 rupees. Okay. If I have to sell, I will say sell 100 shares of X company at a minimum price of 80 rupees. Now, how my order is different is, earlier I didn't specify a limit. Now I am saying, look here broker, I have a maximum when I'm buying. I have a minimum when I'm selling. So as long as the price is adhered to this limit, you can execute my order. That's what a limit order says. Okay, let's see the buying scenario. Again, earlier example, you have a share, you trade in the morning. You see, when you open up your trading screen, you see the share is at 80 rupees. So you call up your broker and say, buy 100 shares of X company. Okay, X company at a maximum price of at a maximum price of 85. Okay, so what the broker will do is, now this is my maximum price. If I am the broker and you are my investor, now you have told me the maximum price is 85. Okay, so above 85, are you comfortable to buy? No, that's the maximum that you're willing to go. So as your broker, I will start executing your trade at all these prices. Okay, let's say market price becomes 85.5, I don't trade. 85.1, I don't trade. Why? It's above the limit. The order says 85 or less. Remember, because it's a buying order, you always want to buy at a lesser price. You don't want to buy at a higher price. Okay, so you want to buy at a lesser price and sell at a higher price. Okay, so for you to buy at a lesser price, you will set a maximum price. This is the maximum, nothing beyond it. You cannot go anything beyond it. Is wrong. You can't go. As long as it's below, you can execute the order. Okay, similarly, if it's a sell order, I want to sell, I come, let's take y'all itself. You want to sell 100 shares of X company, and when you log into your computer screen, the market price says 100 rupees. Okay, 100 rupees. And you call me up and you say, okay, sell 100 shares of X company at minimum price of 90 rupees. So what happens is, let's say 90 is, let's zoom it so it's easier. Let's say 90 is here. This is 90. So if you say sell 100 shares, minimum price is 90. Minimum is 90. Nothing beyond it. If it's below 90, I cannot sell. 89.9, no. 90 is the threshold. Minimum you need to have 90. So as long as it's 95, 94, I can sell down. But if it's below, I cannot execute the order. Okay. So there is a, if you're selling, you have a minimum. Okay. Below that, you don't want to sell at a lower price. You want to sell at a higher price. Therefore, you have to set a minimum price. Below this, no way, you are not going to sell down. So, for selling purpose, if it's a limit order, you have a minimum price. Buying, if it's a limit order, you have a maximum price. If you can, just make a note of it in your slide, because that's what gets tested in your MCQ mostly. They can actually trick you. So, sell orders, minimum price. Buy orders, maximum price. Understand the rationale of it. You have one point and that is your maximum when you want to buy. Anything beyond it, you're not willing to buy that share. You might say that share is not worth that much to buy. So you don't want to buy that at that higher price. If you're selling, you don't want to sell beyond a particular price. Why? You're going to earn a loss. So you have a particular threshold and you will set a minimum price. Understand that. And the most common ways that you can understand whether it's a limit order is when they use instructions like this. Buy at 80 rupees or less. Buy at 160 or more. Okay. So when they say buy at 80 or less, 80 is my maximum price to buy. Sell at 160 or more is my minimum price. Anything more than that, I can immediately sell. But anything less than 160, I cannot sell. So limit order gets into two types. You have a limit buy order and you have a limit sell order. These two are the two types of limit orders. Okay. So in a limit buy order, you have an order to purchase at or below a specified price. Hence, the order is placed at or below the current market bid or the current bid, meaning it's the buying price. For example, you place a limit buy order to purchase 100 shares of a company at 20 rupees. Okay. Assume the share is currently trading at 21. That means when you log in and you see this, when you go to the market, you see that the current trading price is 21. And you call up your broker and you say, I want to buy 100 shares of X company at a maximum price, at 20 rupees or less. Let's say 20 rupees or less. So 20 rupees is my maximum price. If the share price, currently it's at 21, remember, if the share price falls below 20, immediately order gets triggered. Okay. But let's say it's at 21 and it's still moving up. Will my order get triggered? No. My order will not get executed. Why? That's my maximum. 20. Now here the market is pushing the price away again. It's becoming 21, 22. It's increasing. So my order, because it has a maximum of 20, will not get executed. If it's coming down, let's say market price is coming from 21 to 20 or below, that will trigger my limit buy order. Same thing when it comes to a limit sell order. Limit sell order, let's say you have 100 shares of a company and you want to sell minimum at 22. Okay, that's my limit. But the current market price is 21.5. So my limit is 22. I'm at 21.5. Let's say it's here. Now, if the market price moves up, then moment it reaches 22, my order will get triggered. But let's assume it's becoming 21 and even low, 20, 19, then will my order get triggered? No, it won't get triggered. Again, that won't execute my order. That's why we say in a limit order, execution is uncertain. But you know the price because you have a minimum and a maximum. Okay, because of that you have price certainty, but you have execution uncertainty. Know the two differences. Then you have fill or kill order or day order. Now, fill or kill order is the one I spoke before. You execute it in a bulk. It's either completely filled or it's cancelled immediately. This is a conditional order which specifies that the entire order has to be traded in a very short time. It both has to be done. You have to trade the entire quantity and it has to be done immediately. If you can't do either of it, the order will get cancelled immediately. Okay? If neither condition is met, the order is cancelled. That means, let's assume I am your broker and you make an order to me saying, sell 100 shares of X company immediately in fill or kill order. Then what happens is, immediately I need to sell 1000 shares at once, and it has to be immediately in one trade, and that trade has to happen immediately. Let's say I find 2 investors who wants to buy 500 each. No, order is cancelled. But that's immediate. Let's say immediately I can sell to 2, but 500 each. No, I have one investor who's willing to buy my selling quantity of 1000, but it's when I put the order, it's not immediate. After about 10 minutes or after about half an hour, I get that investor. No, it's not immediate, so it gets cancelled. Day order is what happens is, when you make it within the trading hours, until the trading is over, the order is valid. This is an order that is valid only for the trading day on which the order is placed. If the order is not executed by the end of the day, it is treated as cancelled. So what happens is, usually, market opens at 9:30 and finishes at, I think, 2:30. So until that, during that particular day, let's assume that this is at 2:30. This is at 2:30. So if you make a day order at, use another color, at this particular time, okay, at this particular time, it's valid until the trading finishes. The next day, it gets cancelled, or it's not valid. At the end of the trading hour, it gets cancelled. Okay? If you make it at the very beginning of the day, until your order is if your order is not completed as at 2:30, you can't continue it for the next day. It will get immediately cancelled. Now let me tell you why they have such day orders is because what happens is, because the stock market is so volatile, sometimes a share can close, let's assume, at 100 rupees, but tomorrow when the market opens, it can open trading at maybe 80 or even less. Remember, within the day after market hours, so much of information can come out, and that will change the outlook of the share immediately. Okay? Because of that, now assume if you want to sell a particular company's shares and you want to sell at 100 rupees, but you want to sell at 100 rupees, okay, but still your order is not fulfilled. If you don't cancel it at the day end and you carry it forward for tomorrow continuously, and after today's market closure, announcement comes saying this company has done a fraud, this company is closing down their factory or has laid off employees, or some negative information. Remember, information efficiency in the stock market. So very first, the next day when the market opens, the price can be very low. It can drastically drop. So what happens is, for you to negate such situation, especially if you have a market order, it will again get filled at that point. So to avoid such situation, most of the time they use day orders. Why? Within the day, the trading, the information in the role in the market, so it's valid during the day to be filled. End of trading hours, it gets cancelled. Now you have another type, good till cancel. It is the very opposite of day order. Let's see. This is called open orders. Okay. Open orders, here the order remains valid it stays valid throughout, either until it is executed by the by the broker, or until the investor specifically says to cancel the order. Okay, now this is very dangerous one, and it can be harmful, or it can lead to losses. Why? Sometimes the investor itself will not remember to cancel the order. Okay, assume now you want to buy 100 shares of X company and you have not put a limit price or whatnot. If it's a market order and still it's not filled, and at one particular time it gets completed at much higher price than the share is even worth, the investor will be at a disadvantage. Okay, so here the broker can't do anything. Remember, the broker is only the communicator or the communication vehicle in between. So if the investor says, look here, place the order for 1,000 shares, buying 1,000 shares of X company, and keep it valid until it's filled. So that means it's a good till cancel. Until it's filled, it will be open. So the broker will communicate it. It is the investor's duty, if it is unfilled and still open, to call up the broker and say to cancel it. The broker themselves can't cancel it. They're only, the decision maker is the investor, remember? So the broker can't cancel the order. The investor has to say, okay, you cancel this order, then they will cancel it. Okay. Broker would never cancel the order at any time. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the investor to remember those scheduled orders and cancel them if not needed. If not, what happens is, at a time that you're not even aware or remember that you placed such an order, the order will get executed, and it can be done at a very, very unfavorable price. For example, assume you have made a sell market order for 1,000 shares, and you have bought that share for 500 rupees, and you want to sell that share immediately, and at the price, market price at which you made the order, let's assume the 600, and not many investors are actually trading that share. So you have made an order until it's fulfilled, the order will be valid. And you don't remember, weeks go, about 2 weeks goes, and immediately order is filled. And if you look into the price will be around 300. So you have sold a 500 investor share 300, which can be negative to you. Now remember, I'm talking about a market order which is good till cancel. To be on the safe end, as an informed investor, I can make a good till cancelled order, but I can make it a limit order. Now remember, these orders, day order and the good till cancel, talk about the time, the validity of the order. Okay, until what time the order is valid. So I can couple it with the other types of orders as well. The last one we have is the stop loss order. Now this is a mixture of market and limit order. Okay, and then this, what you're trying to do is, as an investor, you want to stop your loss. Okay, so for you to stop your loss, you will have to impose a threshold, remember? So that's why you say it's a aggregation of both market and limit. Let's look into it. A stop loss order is an order to sell a share when the market price reaches or drops below a specified level. This minimizes the loss on the investment in a share. The example is, if an investor holds the share of a company which trades at 95 rupees per share, the investor places a stop loss order with the broker to sell if the price goes below 90 per share. Okay. Once the price reaches 89 per share, order is activated. Here the investor can sell at the best possible price to avoid a big loss. Hence, you use the word stop loss. Now, this particular order, I need to explain it to you a bit clearly. Now, remember in this particular example, we discussed you make a market order. Sorry, not here actually. In the limit side. Here, when you make the limit sell order, okay, limit sell order, you see on your screen, when you look at the screen, the price, the share is getting traded at 100 rupees. And you call up your broker and says, you sell the share at 90 or above. Okay, that's a limit sell order. This is the limit, or anything above I can sell. But anything below, I cannot sell. As a broker, no way. You cannot sell at anything below, you cannot. But what happens in a stop loss order is, assume it's the same. Okay, assume it's the same. You're at 100. Okay, and you place a stop loss order at 90. Okay, stop loss order at 90 meaning your order now doesn't get activated at all these prices. No. But moment the share price hits 90 and below 90 actually, not 90 even, below 90, at the immediate next price, you will execute the order. Okay. Now the difference here is, here you have a threshold, only up above this you will sell. Now here your motive is to stop your loss. If you don't stop your loss at 90, the prices would come down drastically and your loss would be much higher. Okay. To stop at a particular point, you say 90, stop loss order at 90. If the price goes below 90, immediately sell it. I don't want the price to go down further and sell at a much lower price. You're trying to avoid that situation. Okay, that's why you call this a stop loss. As an investor, you are stopping your loss. All right. Now here you can see I have used the word selling. Now stop loss order, I have mainly focused on the selling angle. You might wonder why I have not used the buying angle. Usually stop loss order used for the selling aspect of it. Why? As a seller, you do not want to decrease, bear the loss of a price drop. You can use it for a buy order as well, but in reality in the market it's very low. But remember, you can use, but here what happens is, let's take the same scenario. Let's take this particular scenario. You're at 80, remember? And if the price is continuously increasing, and in a stop loss order, what happens is, if you place the stop loss order at 85, moment the price goes above it, you immediately purchase the share. Okay. But what happens is, why this is so rare is, as an investor, you would, now this might, you can curtail this with a maximum limit order, limit buy order. Okay, why? As an investor, you would want to collect at all these prices. Okay, these are all beneficial prices for you. So you cannot say that an investor would not buy at this and order will only get triggered above this. It's very rare. Understand? But this happens in a situation where the market price increases immediately and drastic. If it's so immediate, you will set a threshold at above. If the increase goes beyond it, immediately purchase it. Why? There the trick is, you know, the price is increasing so drastically and you want to buy at the next possible best price itself, because the price is going to increase further and you can quickly sell it at a much higher price very soon and get out. Okay, so stop loss for a buying angle happens very, very rarely. Understand the reason behind it, but it does happen in a market where it's very, very quick. The market price increase is so quick, and if they want to, you know, curtail their loss here, no, more or less not a curtailment of a loss, but you know, curtail the reduction in their gain levels, then you execute the stop loss order. Mostly it happens to the selling side of it. Okay, so understand the differences of each type. I have never seen a question of it coming in your section 2, but it always comes in your section 1 in your MCQ. A very, very easy question that you can get 2 marks from. Always target to get your full mark of or even a minimum mark of 18 from your MCQ. So that will ease the pressure from section 2. Understand that? So mainly focus on all the easier aspects or the finer details and score well and more on your MCQ by using the limited time. All right. So all these types are important, but the most common ones are you have market order, limit order, coupled with a day order or a good till cancelled order, and in situations where there is a panic in the market, you have stop loss orders coming in. Okay, then we move on to stock market indices. Now here there is an error over here. When I tried searching and replacing, well, that's what happened. What I intended to mention here is mostly you use indices as the plural, but I have seen people use the word indexes as well. So it's both the same. Indexes. Let me write it properly for you. So you can use indices. Now you might wonder why I'm so specific on all these terms, because remember, you're writing a paper relating to financial markets. The word you use is very important. Okay, now in a normal English you can say call and put much differently, but in a finance term, call and put is so different. So that's why the word you use is very, very important. And they also use the word indexes as well. Okay, you can use either. So stock market indices are measure of the price performance of the stocks. Now remember, stock is the broader term. Share is one equity, one portion of the equity component in one company. Stock, you invest so many shares combined and called as a stock. So price performance of stocks is reflected from the stock market indices, which are formed to represent a stock market as a whole or a segment of the market. Now I have listed some well-known indices in the global markets. Now in our market, it's one of the main ones you can see. ASPI and S&P SL20. So here you have, remember, represent a stock market as a whole. You have ASPI, all share price index. Specific segment of the market, we have S&P SL20. We have 20 most liquid or highly traded stock in the S&P SL20. So for both scenarios, you can use stock market indices. So why do we have these indices? Do we really need to have an index in the market? Is our next question. Now, when you come to the stock exchange, you can see that's one of the first things that you see. Now, I urge you to actually visit the stock exchange when the trading is open, because when the trading happens, in this black row, you can see all the tickers and the actively done trades. So you can see one particular ticker 1 into this price. So that means one share is being sold at this price. That trade got executed. So all the trades that get executed is shown in this strip. It keeps moving. So visit the site when you have some time. So the very next thing that you see is the all share price index and the S&P SL20. And you can see the movement over time here. S&P in 1 day, how has it moved? In 1 year, how has it moved? The maximum that you can go for. In 1 quarter, in 1 month, and in 1 week. So you can see it's a pickup. S&P SL20, you can see how it has moved the same levels. Now, why do we need to have such indices? One is, and the most important is, to measure and monitor market movements. Now here you can see, let's focus on the all share price index for the moment. And let's focus on the month aspect, or let's see the week aspect. You can see what was our main, we wanted to see, measure and monitor market movements. We can see that in this particular instance. Now, all share price index reflects how the market has moved during the week. So you can conclude easily that the market picked up by Friday. There was an uptick in the market for the week, you can conclude. Because this shows that if you see the month, you can see the same. But if you see the year from 21st August to the last year, 21st August 2019, how the movement has been, not so drastic. Okay, the improvement is, there is an improvement, but it's a very marginal improvement. But in a week, it was much higher. Okay, because you're comparing at this particular point and about a 5,250, you're comparing with 5,350. Okay, so that easier comparison on how the market moved, how the change in the market is happening can be easily communicated using the all share price index. That will help, that will reflect it to you. Okay, that's one of the very big users as to why we have indices in the market. To provide a means of ascertaining changes in aggregate wealth over time. Now, this is used by investors. They can see how their wealth has improved. Now, if the market is moving and you have an active stock portfolio, you expect your stock portfolio to improve as well. So the index will reflect, will provide you a means of understanding your change in wealth over time as well. Next is to perform a role as barometers of the economy. In particular, stock market movements tend to be leading indicators. I want you to highlight this word, leading indicators, which means that they provide indications of likely future changes in the level of activity in the economy as a whole. Now, not the last week video, the week before, if you watch the video, there they would have compared the movement in the stock market in the US and the economic growth in the US. They would have compared two and said, even though the stock market improved, the actual economy had not improved. They would have made that given you that information. Now, why they made such a call out of that is the stock market movement is a leading indicator to understand how the country or the economy will do in future. Okay, if the stock market is picking up or improving, you expect a positive outlook on the economy, so you expect the activity levels to pick up later on. Why you call it a leading indicator is, first you see the stock market movement improving, and that will lead you to go in to see the improvement in the economy. That's why it's a leading indicator. Before the economy actually improves, that will indicate you at the very first time. It's not a lagging indicator, it's a leading indicator. When the stock market picks up, when you have trading happens, that is used as an indicator to see, okay, there is expectation for economy to do well, manufacturing to pick up. Why? The investment flows are happening at a much rather favorable way, on a very active level. That's why the stock market movement is in a positive way. If it's in a negative way, again, that will indicate the expectation of a downfall or a stagnation in the economic growth. When the investment flows are low, companies cannot expand. Sorry. Companies cannot expand, make the investments. Sorry. So then that will also trigger into their performance, affect the manufacturing or the output of the economy, which will result in the economic stagnation. Okay, so that's why this index is used as a barometer of the economy. It will help you to understand whether the economy will have a positive improvement or a negative improvement by looking at the stock market indices. All right, then you have provide a means of evaluating the performance of fund managers by providing benchmarks against which portfolio managers can be compared. Now, this is a very interesting area. Let me explain you why. Now, index, as we know, helps you to make understand the market movement. Then, as an investor, you can understand how your wealth has improved, and then it will be used to see the market. It's an indicator of the economy. Other one is, remember, you have fund managers. What are the fund management companies? What do? They collect funds from smaller individuals and pool the funds and then invest in stock market or even the debt market. So let's assume a fund which invests fully in the stock market. Okay, it's an equity fund. When you have a fund which pools funds from small investors and invest in the stock market mainly or majority, it's called an equity fund. So for you to assess the fund managers, the ones who make the decision on let's invest in this stock, to assess their performance, what they do is, you have the performance of that particular portfolio or the fund. Okay, and then you compare with the overall stock market, and you can compare with an index to reflect any particular segment of the market. In our scenario, if it's a local fund management company, they can compare with all share price index and compare with the S&P SL20. By comparing that, they can understand whether their portfolio, the portfolio that they manage, has outperformed the market or not. All right, now let me show you the practical aspect of it. Now, this is a fund management company. Okay, it's one of the very first, it's a unit trust actually. It's one of the very first unit trusts to be incorporated in Sri Lanka, 1992. So what they do is they have an equity fund. They collect funds from small investors. Now you have certain investors who can't go directly to the market. They don't know the know-how, or they don't have enough money to invest. So in that particular level, they could actually approach these fund management companies. They will pool funds and invest. Now, here you can see the minimum investment is only 1,000. But if you go directly to trade, you are expected to have a much more quantum of money. Okay. So in that scenario, they have their performance being issued out. Now, in this particular performance report, so you can see their portfolio, the equity fund, 70% they have invested in equity or the stock market, and what kind of shares they have invested. And 30% of it, they have gone for what we call fixed income or debt sources. You can see commercial papers, fixed deposits, and they hold as cash. Now their equity, now this is their entire equity fund. Now this fund's performance, you can see here, they have compared it with the stock market. What they have done, they have ASPI, all share price index, and then you have S&P SL20, the green one. The blue reflects the fund's performance. So they compare it with the market performance and say whether the manager has been able to outperform the market. Now here you can see this is a outperformance. In all these three, you can see there is a outperformance. Why? When ASPI had only a smaller increase, S&P had a negative, this particular fund was able to outperform, get a much more higher growth. In 2018, when everything was negative, they were able to reduce their loss. Okay. In 2017, when all of them had marginal, the particular fund was able to outperform the market. All three are outperformance, but here you were able to get a higher return than the market. Okay. Now here you can see it has, again, in this year for the 3 months, it has struggled. Market has performed better than this fund. So to understand how the fund is performing, you can compare it with the stock market. That will allow you to understand or assess the portfolio manager, whether the person has invested in the right stocks and had made the correct investment decisions. Now here you can see there is another index used. It's called ASTRI All Share Total Return Index. That again we'll discuss next week. It is different from the other two indices because both of these are based on prices alone. Here it's based on the total return to the investor. Here you talk about your capital and your dividends. The return the investor get calculated there. So it's different from the other two. Other two are price indices. This is a return index. Okay. So, but again, you can see all the indices are used to compare and understand how the portfolio manager has worked. The other one is to provide the framework for creation of index funds, which reflects the performance of a stock market. Index funds aim to replicate the performance of an index. Now, what happens in an index fund is, I am unable to get you the, okay, let's see this. So here, download the Excel version. So here you can get the last, this was downloaded by the stock exchange at right now. So at the end of trading, you can see the last traded price, the issued quantity, that will get you the market capitalization. Remember how we studied how to arrive at the market capitalization level? The market price into the issued quantity or the listed quantity will directly get you the market capitalization. Now you can see this is the percentage at which it is all are held. I have only got a part of it, sorry. So if you make all and download, you get the entire stock market list. So if you add all these, you will get at 1. Okay, it reflects the entire holdings. Just by looking, so what an index fund does is, they will invest in all the shares in the same percentage as this particular index. They will replicate the index. Okay, and that is what is called the index fund, and the same proportions as the ASPI or the SLP 20, they will maintain their fund in the very same way. Why you have index fund is, it became popular after the investor Warren Buffett. He made a claim that even though that portfolio managers try to outperform the market, at the end it is the market that will outperform the portfolio. They are able to for a short time, portfolio managers are able to outperform the market, but not at the very end, or not all the time. So Warren Buffett was able to increase or expand his wealth through putting to index funds. He said that market always outperforms than any other person. Okay, so index funds became popular due to that. Index funds had the same proportions as the market. So according to his claim, it actually worked. According to his claim, when the market outperforms any other person, the investors were able to profit out of it. So index fund is a fund which will replicate that particular index according to the same proportion. Okay, so for you to do or maintain an index fund, you will need to have an index in that particular market. So indices are used for that as well. So the index will provide you the framework to create the index funds. So these are the main users of actually having an index in the market. If not, you'll be wondering as to why you need to actually have these index. And you will always see in papers, ASPI increased by this much. Those are all indicators on how the stock market is actually performing. Okay, so understand the importance of actually having an index in the market. So I think we're running out of time. Next week we will focus on the types of indices, but if you can have a read on this is just for you to understand the different types. And then we move to the very important stock valuation. Again, unlike the debenture lesson, we will not do calculations in stock valuation. It's not in your syllabus, but understand the two concepts that they use. You have two ways of calculating the stock valuation, and you must have seen this humongous Excel sheet that I have at the moment. This is a fund. Remember, you have two types, fundamental and technical analysis. If it's fundamental analysis, This is how we value a share. You can see the market price. So when you say E is the expected year, so earlier when we were actually doing, when I was actually working in a company where we used to do stock valuations, this is how we used to work. Using the past performances of the company, we used to predict the stock market prices. So it's just a detail level and to show how the valuations work. Let's look at that next week, but have a read on it, especially this particular slide, comparison of these two. Next week, we would complete this in full and move on to Colombo Stock Exchange and complete that as well. And after that, I'm planning to start on the derivative lessons too, which is much more important for the exam. So with that, we'll wind up for today. I would have asked certain students to stay back, discuss on the past paper questions that they have sent. So I asked them to stay back, so we need to discuss on that. All right, so let's meet next week. Thank you so much for listening and read up on these remaining slides. Thank you.